Hello friends, welcome to the world of industrial safety management. Today we are going to have discourse 8, which is part 4 of the 5 parts of the subject hazard identification, risk assessment and risk management. In this discourse 8, we are going to deal with risk management or control of hazards. Now there are various approaches to safety. Basically there are 3 approaches. The first one is the traditional approach to safety, which focuses on the prevention of injury, accidents and compliance with legal requirements on health and safety at work. So in traditional approach, the concern of the management is more about the injuries, accidents and legal compliance. But the modern approach, or you can say a strategic approach, is to see safety in the wider context of the total risk management and total loss control. So we just don't see one aspect, that is injury, accidents and legal compliance. So here we are not only concerned with the prevention of injury and accident, but essentially we are also concerned about the prevention of ill health and with other sources of loss to the organization, that is breach of security, fire and property damage and so on. So it is a holistic approach. So this approach looks into safety in a holistic way and aim at zero injuries, zero health impacts, zero environmental impacts, zero loss to the property and continuity of business in a safest manner. We'll go to the previous slide. So here you can see the figure, that is mission 0. So when we say mission 0, that means zero injuries, zero tolerance to the unsafe acts and behaviors, zero compromise with the safety and zero impacts for our families and communities. So this is that everything you desire, that everything comes to zero. So no accidents, no health impacts, zero environmental impacts, zero loss to the property and continuity of the business. It is covered in the business continuity plans, but that is not our subject of discussion. And the third approach is the behavioral approach. We will discuss the behavioral approach when we will discuss the behavioral based safety. So our more concern is about the holistic approach, about the total risk management and total loss control. Now when we looked into the risk rating matrix, we have seen there are significant risks, there are major risks or minor risk, critical risks. So in other way, with this figure we can see that in the top right corner of the matrix, where impact is more and the likelihood is also more. So they are the area of the significant risk and there has to be an active risk management in this area. So they are the risk of the major concern for the management and they have to either eliminate those risks or minimize the risk and bring them down to the minor or minimal level anyhow. So when we talk about the risk management, it is much focused on the significant risk areas. And there is an area where the impact of the consequence is high, but the probability is low. But even these areas are also matter of concern, the last quadrant, the fourth quadrant. And so there has to be a ongoing monitoring for such type of risks. Okay. So what is the methodology of risk management? So regardless of the type of risk, there is a single approach or methodology that can be used to manage the risk. A common approach has to be taken by all. What are the key stages of this approach? We have already discussed at length in the previous discourses that the first step is identify the hazards. Second step is assess the risk. Third, eliminate the hazard if possible, or eliminate the risk if possible. Where this is not possible, minimize the risk or control the risk. If you take certain action to control the risk or improve the controls, check that it is successful. You ensure that whatever the actions you are taken, they are successful and it has successfully brought down the risk. Then there is need of review periodically to ensure that this remain the case, that there is no downsliding in the risk assessment process and risk management process. So same is shown in the diagram. It is a cycle that first is the risk identification, second is the risk assessment and prioritization of the risk. That means you prioritize the critical risk and major risk and try to resolve those risks immediately. Then third is the risk owner appointment and risk analysis. That means you have a group of people who do the analysis of the risk assessment. They decide on the level of the risk and they are the experts, so they suggest you the corrective actions and then they can take the follow-up of the corrective actions. So by deciding the action, you treat the risk. That means you take the corrective actions and then everything is reported to the higher management, and higher management also take the reviews. Then there are certain outcomes of the management review or the audits, and again it becomes the basis of the next risk assessment or risk identification. So this cycle has to be completed and it should go on. There is no stoppage. This cycle has to continue forever. So what is the risk management process? Let us talk in detail. So first thing is, organizations should establish an effective risk management process. For large organization, big organization where the hazardous processes are there or hazardous machines are there, it is a must. Now establishing this risk management process, it enables management to operate a risk-based approach. So how is the approach to all the activities or the tasks which are carried out? That it is risk-based. So that approach, risk-based approach, is there for establishing internal control systems. So you evaluate the risk and accordingly you create the internal controls. You create these controls, these systems within your organization to effectively mitigate or control their significant risk. So again the focus is on the significant risk. So this is recognized as an integral part of good management practices. So the way you have good management practices for production, good management practices for quality. So safety is also to be involved or integrated. So there has to be good management practices for safety also. So it should become the integral part of the management. Risk management and compliance must be an integral part of the decision making. So it should not be only a part of the management, but it should be a part of the decision making. So every manager, production manager, purchase manager, administrative manager, they must take part actively when you are taking certain decision where there is a relation to the safety management. Risk management activities and compliance controls must be embedded within normal business operations. So safety is not separate. It is not something to do separately, but whatever day-to-day normal business operations you are carrying out, the safety concern must be embedded in that. Management must aim to identify and treat risk on a proactive basis. There should not be any reactive response. There has to be a proactive response. That means if something happens, some accident happens and then you take the cognizance and then you take the actions. That is not the case. You should proactively find out the hazards, analyze them, then decide on the risk rating and mitigate. What are the stepping stones of the risk management process? Firstly, try to define the risk management. We have already looked into that. It is the application of policies, systems, practices and resources that minimizes risk and impact. To manage the risk, we have to create first occupational health and safety policy. Secondly, we have to create occupational health and safety management system. We have to create hierarchy of controls. We have to create safe practices or safe system of work, that is SSOW. Competent human resource and other resources. Competent human resource is very important. And a safety culture. So these are actually the foundation or the stepping stone on which the risk management process is dependent upon. Over and above, there has to be a culture of transparency. Everything should be transparent. Safety is not a subject of hiding something. So culture of transparency must be encouraged and reinforced through identification, reporting, disclosure and open dialogue. So there has to be identification of the hazard, there has to be reporting, there has to be disclosures, what you are doing, what you have done, and there has to be continuous dialogue, communication to promote sharing of risk management and compliance information and good practices. There has to be all the time a good communication, sharing of the facts and figures, information and whatever good practices you are carrying out. Now, what is the occupational health and safety policy? Actually, many places it is now EHS policy, but as we are not dealing with the environment, we are dealing with the occupational health and safety policy. Now, a policy is a statement of intent and is implemented as a procedure or protocol. So, it is a statement of intent and it is implemented as a procedure or protocol. So, you might find, you must have seen the different policies, OH&S policies of the different companies. It is the smallest document. There may be 5, 6, 10 sentences in that. But its intent is very large. Probably it is the smallest document, whatever the documents a company has, but with the larger intent. For example, when I was working with one of the pharmaceutical company, our policy, EHS policy was of 1 page. But the annexure to it, that how we are going to achieve whatever we have given in the policy, whatever intents we have expressed in the policy, that document was of 40 pages. So you just can imagine, you can understand the meaning of the sentence, smallest document with the largest intent. Now this policy is intended to help prevent accident and injuries. So there is mention that we will see that the accident do not happen, we will see that the risk is mitigated, we will see that the environment is protected, so on and so forth. So it is intended to help prevent accident and injuries. It is there to increase safety awareness, meet requirements of environmental and occupational health and safety laws and regulations. It should reduce the institutional liability. It should intend to manage risk and establish safety responsibility for members of the organization. Please go through the different policies of the different companies. More or less things will be repeated in the same manner. So this policy is a written statement. It has to be essentially a written statement. It is to be created by the employer or the higher management, stating the company's commitment. What is the most important part of the policy is the commitment of the top management for the protection of the health and safety of the employees and that of the public, which may be off-site. So it is an endorsed commitment by management to its employees regarding their health and safety. So management is endorsing their commitment by having this policy written. So there is a sense of responsibility expressed by the management that they are responsible for the health and safety of their employees. Now, occupational health and safety management system, it is a subsystem of overall main management system, like any other subsystem such as production, HR, finance. So we have various management system, the production management system, the human resource management system, finance management system, quality management system. Similarly, this is a separate management system which has to be created by the management, higher management, and the way all these different management systems are integrated and how the higher management look into all these systems thoroughly. So this safety management system is to be created, integrated and monitored thoroughly by the higher management. Now every management system evolves because there is a requirement. So why production management system is required? Because production is to be managed in the best way, in the best manner. Why financial management system is required? But the finance is to be managed in a way that there is a maximum benefit from what we invest. So it is evolved due to the need to ensure safety, prevent accident and occupational diseases and safeguard the environment. It is a systematic practice of identifying potential for accidents and damage, assessing the risk, making decisions for appropriate controls, implementing and then monitoring the system to control the loss. So you identify the potential hazards which may convert into accident and damage. You assess the risk, that means you assess what will be the consequence and what is the likelihood of the hazards which are there. You take the decision to take the appropriate actions for the appropriate controls, and you implement this system and you keep on monitoring this system to control the total loss. So here you can see the management system loop, that first there is a policy, then comes planning, then comes implementation and operation, checking and corrective action, monitoring and control, then comes the management review, and the cycle goes on. So this is like a Deming cycle: plan, do, check, act. So we have looked into the policy. Now planning is based on the various data which the management has about the safety. So data comes from the audits and management review, data comes from the the investigation of the accidents and near misses, data comes from the risk assessment. So you gather the data from all the corners, observe what is required to do to correct the things, and in aligning with the policy, you plan. There has to be alignment with the policy when you do the planning. Then you implement, you create the implementation structure and implement it with the help of the safety department as well as the people who are responsible for safety in each and every department and section. So whatever is decided, whatever is planned, that is implemented. Then you continuously monitor, and if you find some lacuna, you do the corrective action. You correct your planning, you correct your implementation procedure, and so on. And at the end of the year maybe, or at the end of half year, management takes the review and they have their own opinions and they have their own remarks. And on the basis of that, you again go through the policy, planning, implementation cycle. So there may be, very rarely, but maybe a need to correct the policy. There is always a need to correct the planning. There is always a need to improve the implementation, and so on. So it is a system and it goes on continuously. It is no start and end. There is a continuation. Now what are the principles of the management systems? Now it is from the OSHA's 18001. So what is principle 1? Commitment and policy. That organization should define its policy, ensure commitment to its policy and management system. Principle of planning, I discussed about it, that an organization should plan to fulfill its OH&S policy, its objectives and targets. There has to be certain objectives for the safety. There has to be certain target fixed every year for certain achievements as far as the safety is concerned. Principle 3 is implementation and operation. For effective implementation, an organization should develop the capabilities and support mechanism necessary to achieve its OH&S policy objectives and targets. So very essentially, there has to be an organization created. There has to be, creation of the capabilities in the people. There has to be a support mechanism whenever it is necessary. So this is principle 3, implementation and operation. So there has to be effective implementation. Principle 4 is measurement and evaluation. So organization should measure, monitor, evaluate its OH&S performance and take preventive and corrective action. So here you evaluate the performance. At the end of certain period, you evaluate, okay, we decided this. So in last 6 months, what we have achieved, where we have failed. So where there is a need for the improvement, where there is a need of the corrective action. So that is decided after the evaluation, because evaluation is a must. You have to evaluate the performance and thereafter you have to decide on the corrective actions. Lastly, management review. So an organization should regularly review and continually improve its OH&S management system with the objective of improving its OH&S performance. So the involvement of the top management is a must, that what has happened throughout the year or the last 6 months, where we were at the start of the period, now where we are at the end of the period, whether we have reduced the number of accident, whether we have reduced the severity of accident, whether we have done something on the PPE regime, whether we have done successfully something on the work permit regime, and so on. So management review whether in each and every aspect there is improvement and what is the further scope of the improvement. That has to be looked by the management review, and then that whatever the outcome of the review is there, that should be again the basis of the further planning, and the cycle should continue. Now the next stepping stone is hierarchy of control. It is called as hierarchy because it has to follow in a certain manner. So at the top is elimination. So always there is a preference given that the hazard is to be eliminated or risk is to be eliminated. Then if elimination is not possible, there is a way of substitution. If some risk remain even after the substitution, then you have to create the engineering control, that is containment, confinement, then enclosures, local exhaust ventilation, air conditioning, general ventilation, and so on. Generally the engineering controls are the common protections. Then the administrative control like SOPs, different work methods, SSOW, propaganda for safety, posters, then work instructions, so on and so forth. The administrative control, there is, way of how the shift is to be managed, how many hours are to be given to the worker, how many breaks are to be given. So we will discuss all these things in detail when we will discuss separately the hierarchy of control. And the last control is the personal protective equipment. There is a misconception or a wrong belief in the industry that if you provide the personal protective equipment, the things are okay. But according to the safety hierarchy of control, it is the last resort. When after elimination, substitution, engineering control, administrative control, still some residual risk remains, and if there is no possibility of the engineering control or administrative control, then you have to use the personal protective equipment. They act as the barrier between your body and whatever the operation you are doing. So there is a need to establish hierarchy of control. There is need to establish safe system of work. What is this SSOW? A formal procedure for doing a job in a safe way, which results from systematic examination of a task in order to identify all the hazards. So it is called as job safety analysis, and you systematically examine the job or the task, you find out what are the hazards, and then you define safe method so that the hazards are eliminated or risk is minimized. So it may include the physical layout of the task. What is the layout where the people are working, the sequence in which the work is carried out, the provision of warnings and notices, issues of the special instruction, provision of safety equipment and adequate safety precautions. So it combines the study of materials, people, plant, equipment, task and environment. It should identify and document all the hazards, safety precautions and safe working practices associated with all the activities performed by employees. We will look into safe system of work separately and in detail. So all these, PPE regime, your work to permit regime, LOTO regime, all these regimes are part of the safe system of work, but we will look into it in detail afterwards. Now, where this safe system of work is highly preferred, generally all maintenance and cleaning operations, because it is not a regular activity and there may be some lurking hazards when you are doing the maintenance. So maintenance and cleaning, electrical isolation, electrical testing, working on the roofs, use of hazardous materials, lifting and handling of the materials, cutting and welding, that is hot operations, confined space entry and contractors activities or the people of the contractors which are moving around on your factory premise and working there. So in all these activities and maybe some more activities, the safe system of work is needed, because you cannot have the standard operating procedure for this. For regular production operations, you can have standard operating procedures, but these are the operations where standard operating procedures are not possible. So here you have to create the safe system of work, taking into account the job safety analysis and whatever the hazards you find out. Very importantly, competent human resource. So provide the resource to ensure all managers and staff, including temporary staff, are adequately informed, instructed and trained. So everyone who is working on the shop floor or the factory premise, maybe the company employee or maybe the contractor worker, they must be adequately informed about all the activities. They must be informed about the hazards. They are to be instructed properly that how they have to behave, how they have to work, how they have to complete their task, what procedures they have to follow. So all this training is a must. So you have to make the people competent. So instruction and training is required. You must identify the appropriate AHS training for all individuals. So you have a training department, so there has to be a place for EHS training, and that training should not be haphazard or once in a while. It has to be a continuous training program. So you have to create a training matrix for that and include it in that individual personal development plan. So it is called as PDP. So every individual PDP, there has to be inclusion of the certain trainings after the performance evaluation of that particular person. If you find that he is lacking in some areas, so the higher up recommend that person that you should undergo such type of trainings. So if there are certain lacuna in the safety understanding, then safety training is a must. The identification of responsibilities and competencies is a key step in successful EHS management. So, the responsibilities should be according to the competencies. So, competence must match the responsibility. If the competence does not match with the responsibility, that person will not be able to fulfill his task. And this strategy for training should be developed by the operations manager through his or her general risk assessment. So, try to understand that majorly the operations people are involved and they take help of the EHS advisor or safety officer or a safety manager to decide on the risks, to do the risk assessment. So, it is not the job of only the EHS manager or safety officer, but it is equally a job of the operation managers also, and he should see that whatever the people are working in his department are competent enough not only for the production, not only for the quality, but they are competent enough to look into the safety aspect also. So, all requirements for EHS training should be coordinated by the human resource department. So, all the training programs are coordinated by the human resource department. Now, next stepping stone is safety culture. We will look into safety culture separately at length. So, safety culture is a term often used to describe the way in which safety is managed in the workplace, and often reflects the attitude, beliefs, perceptions and values that employees share in relation to safety. So, it is a behavioral aspect, that how people have the attitudes, how they treat safety, what is their attitude towards safety, what are their beliefs towards safety, what are their perception about the risk, what are their values, whether they value the life, whether they value their co-worker, so their values. So, these are the things, that attitudes, belief, perception and values that employees share in relation to the safety. So, this definition combines key issues such as personal commitment. So, culture needs personal commitment. It needs that you take the responsibility and share the responsibility. It is concerned with that you communicate transparently, wholly, and you learn the ways that are strongly influenced by the upper level management. So, this training and learning process is the lookout of the higher management. They must have the keen interest that how people are behaving, how they are communicating, what is their commitment, how they are sharing the responsibility, whether they are ready to learn, how are they learning. So, all these things are influenced by the upper level management, but at the same time it includes the behavior of everyone in the organization. See, everyone must be committed, everyone must consider himself responsible. See, out of say 100 people, 50% people consider their commitment, they consider themselves responsible, and 50 people do not. The things will not change. So, it includes the behavior of everyone in the organization. So, how you develop the safety culture, values and principle? So, there has to be a strong leadership which has a strong commitment for safety and safety culture. That commitment must be manifested. It should be visible for the employees that yes, our managers are very concerned about the safety of the people. They are very much concerned about the life and limb of the people. they are concerned about the property of the company, and they are behaving that way and they are leading by example, then safety is a serious issue. You can't take it lightly. That top management as well as middle level management, the lower level management and the workers, everyone has to treat safety seriously. You need not take it lightly. Everyone should have the ownership of the safety responsibilities. Then resources must be provided by the management. So it should be the human resource, adequate human resource, adequate money. Then you have to provide all the tools, tackle, equipments, instruments. You have to provide personal protective equipment. So all the resources has to be made available. So for every period, 6 month, year, you have to set target. How you are going to improve on the safety aspect, that you are going to reduce the severity rate, you are going to reduce the incidence rate, you are going to implement the zero access system, you are going to implement the LOTO regime. So different targets are to be set and then those targets are to be fulfilled. If there is an accident or event, then there has to be prompt and thorough investigations. Then behavior must be consistent. That means you are very much concerned about safety on safety day or a safety week, and for all other days you forget about safety. That should not be the case. So consistently 24 hours, 365 days, your attention should be towards safety. Whatever the deficiencies are there, you must target it and take the remedial actions. It is very important that you communicate with your staff and seek for their wholehearted participation. It should not be participation for participation's sake, but it should be wholehearted participation. Then you have to continuously educate your people, train your people and keep on motivating them. See, motivating is also not a one-day affair or a one-time affair. Motivation is a continuous process. And so you have to keep on motivating people for safety. So friends, in this discourse we looked into the risk management system, how to create the risk management system, what are the stepping stones and the part of the risk management system, like policy, system, then your competencies, training of the people and so on. So thank you for watching. I request you to resume viewing by switching on to discourse 9, where we will look into management of CAPA, that is corrective action and preventive action. Friends, do not forget to share, like, comment and to subscribe the channel. Thank you very much.